Hello and welcome to Newsround, a recap of stories that made headlines during the week. I am Bukola Samuel with the headlines. Federal High Court in Abuja dismisses suit seeking to declare vacant the seat of Governor of Cross River State, Ben Ayade. Court also strikes out 8 of the 15 counts against the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, Nnamdi Kanu. Nobel laureate Professor Wole Soyinka slams politicians for frequent defection to other parties. Plus, UN General Assembly votes to suspend Russia from Human Rights Council. That's Newsround in View. Welcome. It's been a week of court judgments with landmark decisions on issues bordering on politics and terrorism. First, we begin from the Federal High Court Abuja, which has refused to declare vacant the seat of Governor of Cross River State, Ben Ayade, citing judgment of the Court of Appeal in Enugu on April the 1st, 2022, that defection is not a ground for the removal of a governor from office. In a judgment delivered by Justice Taiwo, the court held that the removal of a sitting governor and his deputy can only be in line with constitutional provisions, noting that the judiciary lacks the powers to remove an elected officer.
The courtroom is filled to its capacity with lawyers and supporters alike as Justice Taiwo of the Federal High Court Abuja delivers his judgment on the defection of Governor Ben Ayade of Cross River State and his deputy, Mr. Ivara Esu, from the People's Democratic Party to the All Progressives Congress. After a series of adjournments, the trial judge finally announces his verdict: that the court has no power to declare the governor's seat vacant, a job he says belongs to the legislature. He adds that the Electoral Act does not particularly state what happens if a candidate defects from a party that sponsored the winner of an office to another. Justice Taiwo adds that the defection cannot be a ground for removal from office, but they can only be removed in line with Sections 180, 188, and 189 of the Constitution on account of death, resignation, or impeachment. He, however, agrees that defection from a winning party to a losing one is not proper.
Members of Assembly and members of the National Assembly are governed by Section 68, subsection 1G, and Section 109, subsection 1G. Even then, what the Court of Appeal, Enugu Judicial Division, heard last week is that even at that, it is not the function of a court to remove them from office, to sack them. The function of the court is to order a by-election. And that in terms of the removal of a governor or deputy, just like president and vice president, as decided by the Supreme Court, the apex court of the land, the highest court of the land, in all laws and all legal matters, the Supreme Court had decided in that article's case that defection by president or vice president, and of course by parity, governor and deputy governor, is not one of the grounds permitted by the Constitution to remove a governor who has been sworn in, who has taken the oath of office and oath of allegiance, as held by the same Supreme Court in Marwa versus Nyako.
The People's Democratic Party had taken the governor and his deputy to court, seeking an order directing them to vacate their seats over their defection to the APC.
Still on court stories, some reprieve may have come for the detained leader of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, Nnamdi Kanu, as the Federal High Court Abuja has struck out 8 of the 15-count charge filed by the federal government against him. In a ruling by Justice Binta Nyako, Nnamdi Kanu was freed of count 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 and 14, which border on incitement to attack police and kill police officers and destabilize the economic structures of the country. However, the court held that Kanu has to defend himself on counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, and 15 based on allegations leveled against him.
This has become the normal situation whenever the case involving the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, Mr. Nnamdi Kanu, comes up at the Federal High Court. However, the situation is different following the implementation of the practice direction for the trial of terrorism cases issued by the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court, Justice John Soho. Journalists were barred from covering the day's proceedings. Nevertheless, the trial judge, Justice Binta Nyako, proceeds to deliver her ruling on Mr. Kanu's preliminary objections, which is on the jurisdiction to entertain the suit. While she dismissed the objection, she struck out 8 of the 15 charges against Mr. Kanu. The dismissed charges border on incitement to attack police officers and destabilize the economic structures in the country, among others.
8 of the 15-count charge were quashed and dismissed, leaving 7 counts that are on wobbling legs, counts that wobble, counts that are groggling, counts that fumble, counts that dwaddle. They will not stand, they will not hold water. Because you cannot build something upon nothing and expect it to stay. It is not possible. If 8 counts went, the remaining 7, as a necessary corollary, we go. It follows as the night, the day, as the rainy season, the dry season. It follows. The 7 counts remaining, we go. But when we look at those 7 counts, whether they even hold any water at all in law.
However, he is expected to answer on the charges that border on his leadership of IPOB. The judge also insists that the earlier bench warrant issued against him still stands.
All the counts relating to terrorism are really sustained by the court. And they make heavy weather on the issue of rendition. And the court bluntly said that rendition in this situation is allowed, because rendition in criminal law, in criminal case, is allowed. After all, the defendant is under a bench warrant, and anywhere he is seen, the law allows him to be taken and be forcefully brought to court, and that was what exactly happened. And again, with respect to membership of IPOB, which he denied, it was the argument of the defendant that the matter is on appeal on whether IPOB is a proscribed organization under the Nigerian law or not. The court also emphatically said even though the issue is on appeal, but what is in place is that IPOB still remain a terrorist organization within the confine of Nigerian law.
The judge subsequently fixed May 18 for ruling on his bail application, while the trial begins on May 26, 2022 at the Code of Conduct Tribunal Complex, Abuja.
The Federal High Court, Abuja, has also ordered the federal government to implement the 35% affirmative action for appointive political positions. Delivering judgment, Justice Donatus Okorowo held that the government had the obligation to implement the 35% affirmative action, accusing past governments of acting in breach of international treaties on women's participation in government.
For several days, women occupied the gate leading to the National Assembly, protesting the rejection of the 5 gender bills in the Constitution amendment process. But what the women did not get from lawmakers, they have secured from the court, following the judgment of the Federal High Court ordering the federal government to implement the 35% affirmative action. The women groups had approached the court to seek the enforcement of the 35% affirmative action in appointive positions, including ministerial appointments. In his judgment, Justice Donatus Okorowo held that the national gender policy is not merely a policy statement, but one that must be backed with requisite action on the part of government. He says the 35% affirmative action, which entails appointive positions for women to ensure inclusivity, must not be merely on paper, as Nigeria is a signatory to international treaties, particularly on those entrenching the rights of women. The judge further dismisses the preliminary objection of the federal government that the woman had no locus standi to sue, among others.
The court agreed with us that over the years, the Nigerian state has been violating the rights of women as pertains to participation in governance. That subsequent or several governments over the years has been marginalizing women in their own country. And the court condemned this act and held that the right of Nigerian women to freedom from discrimination must be recognized and enforced by all authorities and persons in Nigeria.
For us, it is victory, and for the government, we know that they will acknowledge this and do the needful in terms of ensuring that we have a balanced system of governance that will bring about fast development for the country and that would address all other issues affecting the country.
By this judgment, all eyes are now focused on the federal government to obey court orders by implementing the 35% affirmative action.
Following the directive by the federal government to telecommunication companies on the NIN-SIM linkage policy, many Nigerians appear to have woken to the reality of a possible blockage of their lines. In the nation's capital, the National Identity Management Commission (NIMC) enrollment centers witnessed a large turnout of applicants who are desperate to get their NIN.
The National Identity Management Commission enrollment centers in the Federal Capital Territory are again witnessing long queues after a long time. It's been more than 1 year, 3 months since the federal government announced a policy mandating all telecommunication subscribers to link their SIM cards with their unique national identity number. But millions are yet to do so, even though the government has had to extend the deadlines multiple times. However, the federal government in a statement on Monday announced the decision to bar all outgoing calls for telephone lines not linked to a unique national identity number beginning from April the 4th, 2022. These applicants blame their inability to get their NIN on the inefficiency of the enrollment system.
The whole place is jam-packed. They'll just go and tell you, come tomorrow, come today, come tomorrow. So with this, it's actually affecting the people linking it and the time being given.
The stress is too much. If you go to the office for them to handle your case, they will tell you to come back in 2 weeks.
Others allege complicity on the part of those in charge.
We ask you to pay 1,135 for what? For the registration.
Even when I was coming, more than 3 people stopped me that I should give them 3,500 naira, that before 2 days it will start working.
Meanwhile, available data from the Nigerian Communications Commission, NCC, shows there are 197.8 million active telecommunication subscribers in Nigeria as at February 2022, out of which at least 72.8 million subscribers now risk being disconnected following the latest directive.
The SIM-NIN linkage policy commenced in December 2020, and so far, over 125 million Nigerians have had their SIM cards linked to their national identity number. But there are still many, like these ones behind me, struggling to do so, and are hoping that the enrollment process will be made efficient. Otherwise, they stand the risk of not being able to make calls. Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
You're watching Newsround. When we return, President Buhari assents to Executive Order 11 on maintenance of national public buildings. Stay with us. Welcome back. The President is giving assent to Executive Order 11 on public buildings maintenance across the country. The signing of the document preceded the weekly Federal Executive Council meeting at the Council Chambers of the State House, Abuja. And speaking shortly before appending his signature, President Buhari directed all ministries, departments and agencies to set up maintenance departments in line with the provisions of the new executive order.
The weekly Federal Executive Council meeting started with President Muhammadu Buhari signing the Executive Order 11, a national public building maintenance policy. According to the President, maintenance of assets is more than a culture.
Maintenance of assets is more than a culture. It is an economy from which many can prosper, and we must nurture and water that economy by policy and actions that create opportunities and inclusion for our people.
After the meeting, which lasted almost 4 hours, State House correspondents are briefed on the memos presented and approvals granted by Council. Beginning with the Ministry of Works, who got approval for 3.1 billion naira for the rehabilitation of the Kefi-Nasarawa-Toto Road. He breaks down the benefits of Executive Order 11 on the Nigerian people.
Because we have awarded a maintenance contract after rehabilitation for cleaning, sweeping, security, and horticulture and all of that, 40 new people who had no work before are now employed by each facility management. 40, a minimum of 40 in each of those secretariats.
Air terminals in Abuja and Port Harcourt are to be maintained with 5.65 billion naira for 3 years. L3 X-ray machine parts are to be procured at 469.6 million naira. And clinics are to be constructed for the airports in Abuja, Kano, and Lagos.
And efficient manner.
The Minister of Information and Culture briefs on the memo from the Ministry of Education, stating the council has granted licenses to 12 proposed private universities, which he says will be mentored by already existing universities in their various locations. He also briefs on the government's response to insecurity, especially in Kaduna State, and calls for support from all Nigerians as the government addresses the situation.
What was not reported was the very timely and efficient manner it was repelled, and the huge casualties suffered by the bandits terrorists. The terrorists, the oxygen they need is what is being provided daily today, which is they want to occupy the front page of every paper. In a matter of time, we will overcome the terrorists, the bandits, and criminals all around. But far from being overwhelmed, I think we're in control and we're in charge of the matter.
Thank you very much. We are not overwhelmed. That's the message from the Nigerian government to the Nigerian people as regards insecurity following the attacks in Birnin Gwari a few days ago. They're saying that they do not necessarily report every single success that has been achieved by the Nigerian military, but they're calling on the media to support the government to ensure that these bandits or terrorist organizations do not get the fuel they need from the front pages of newspapers. And he's saying we are on top of the situation. From the State House in Abuja, Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
Nobel laureate Professor Wole Soyinka has slammed politicians for defecting from one party to another, thereby making it difficult to distinguish between the major parties. Professor Soyinka was speaking during a press conference in Lagos, where he raised doubts about his participation in the 2023 general elections. He challenged the country's youth to mobilize and initiate a change in process that will lead to the emergence of the desired leader, which they failed to achieve in 2015.
I've just decided that I will take a ringside seat on the coming elections. You see, the situation is so, not confused, no, it's quite clear to some extent, but at the same time it's turbid in the sense that, look at the two major parties. There's been such crossing over from one rivulet to another, each crossing having its own purpose, that it's getting very difficult to even distinguish between the two major parties. And, unfortunately, the youth of this nation don't seem to want to take their destiny in their own hands. In other words, if you remember, during the last elections, we encouraged the youth to mobilize, get a consensus candidate, and of course, capable, not just youthful, not youth for youth's sake, but a really effective and potentially effective leader, and present that candidate to us. Well, they failed to do that, and I have a fear that the same thing will happen this year. So very likely, all I'll do is take French leave of the elections and just watch the results.
Meanwhile, the Nobel laureate has described the current administration as one needing help to combat the spate of insecurity in the country, blaming the situation on a number of factors, including alleged misappropriation of allocations to security.
This presidency, this government needs help. It no longer can cope, and not just now. It's been going on for years, and I don't know that really it's just that the citizens of this country should live under such a cloud, such uncertainty. Get up in the morning, you don't know if you get back at night. But of course the problem hasn't just begun. That's what I want everybody to understand. There has been laxity, there's been tolerance of impunity, in fact the encouragement of impunity. There's been the compromise even within the judiciary so that cases are not solved in time and seem to be solved very objectively. There's been, of course, the thieving of money, funds intended for the military to combat insurgency, whether of the religious or the secular kind, known as banditry. So it's a multi-level situation, and it did not begin just now. If we don't keep stressing that, we'll never get to the root of the problem or find effective ways of not only tackling but eradicating the problem. So it's an old sore which has now gone gangrenous.
And finally on Newsround, the UN General Assembly has suspended Russia from the UN Human Rights Council over reports of gross and systematic violations and abuses of human rights by invading Russian troops in Ukraine. The US-led push garnered 93 votes in favor, while 24 countries voted no and 58 countries abstained. A two-thirds majority of voting members in the 193-member General Assembly in New York, abstentions do not count, was needed to suspend Russia from the 47-member Geneva-based Human Rights Council. It was the third resolution adopted by the 193-member General Assembly since Russia invaded neighboring Ukraine on February the 24th. The two previous General Assembly resolutions denouncing Russia were adopted with 141 and 140 votes in favor.
But we would like to see.
And that's it on Newsround. Thank you for watching. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo. Bye for now.